Today, homosexuality and queer identities may be acceptable to more Indian youths than ever before. But within the boundaries of family, home and school, acceptance of their sexuality and freedom to openly express their gender choices still remain a constant struggle for lesbian, gay, bisexual and transgender people. There are ancient Indian texts which are relevant to modern LGBT causes. Religion has played a role in shaping Indian customs and traditions. While injunctions on homosexuality's morality are not explicitly mentioned in the religious texts central to Hinduism, it has taken various positions ranging from homosexual characters and themes in its text to being neutral or antagonistic towards it. Rigveda, one of the 4 sacred texts of Hinduism, says Vikriti evam prakriti, meaning what seems unnatural is also natural, which some scholars believe recognizes homosexual and transsexual dimensions of human life, like all forms of universal diversities. The ancient Indian text Kama Sutra, written by Vatsyayana, dedicates a complete chapter on erotic homosexual behavior. Historical literary evidence indicates that homosexuality has been prevalent across the Indian subcontinent throughout the history, and that homosexuals were not necessarily considered inferior in any way until about 18th century during the British colonial rule. One leader, Akkai Padmashali, born Jagdish, was influential in the protests and demonstration that eventually led to repeal of Section 377 of Indian Penal Code. She started organization Unde in 2014, which envisioned a society that is non-discriminatory and gender just. Unde in Kannada means convergence, and that is what she envisioned for the society of India as a whole. She wanted Unde to be a place where people of all sexual orientations spoke openly of their concerns. Their mission statement is to create a space for dialogue, support and strengthen action to visibilize issues of dignity, voice, sexuality in relation to children, women and sexual minorities. They develop partnership with community groups through social movements, engage with the state and conduct research. Several organizations including NAS Foundation Trust, the National AIDS Control Organization, Law Commission of India, Union Health Ministry, National Human Rights Commission of India and the Planning Commission of India have expressed support for decriminalizing homosexuality in India. In September 2006, Nobel laureate Amartya Sen, acclaimed writer Vikram Seth and other prominent Indians publicly demanded the repeal of Section 377 of the IPC. The open letter demanded that in the name of humanity and of our constitution, this cruel and discriminatory law should be struck down. On June 30, 2008, Indian Labour Minister Oscar Fernandez backed calls for decriminalization of consensual gay sex, and Prime Minister Manmohan Singh called for greater tolerance towards homosexuals. On 23 July 2008, Bombay High Court Judge Bilal Naski said that India's unnatural sex law should be reviewed. The Law Commission of India had historically favored the retention of this section in its 42nd and 156th report, but in its 172nd report delivered in 2000, it recommended its repeal. On 9 August 2008, the Health Minister Anbumani Ramadas began his campaign for changing Section 377 of Indian Penal Code, which defines homosexuality as unnatural act and thus is illegal. At the International AIDS Conference in Mexico City, he said Section 377 of IPC, which criminalizes men who have sex with men, must go. The United Nations has urged India to decriminalize homosexuality by saying it would help the fight against HIV/AIDS by allowing intervention programs much like the successful ones in China and Brazil. On 24 August 2017, India's Supreme Court gave the country's LGBT community the freedom to safely express their sexual orientation. Therefore, an individual's sexual orientation is protected under country's right to privacy law. However, the Supreme Court did not directly overturn any laws criminalizing same-sex relationships. On 6 September 2018, consensual gay sex was legalized by India's Supreme Court. Section 377 of India's Penal Code, dating back to 1861, makes sexual activities against the order of nature punishable by law and carries a life sentence. The law replaced a variety of punishments for zina mandated in Mughal Empire's Fatwa-e-Alamgiri. These ranged from 50 lashes for a slave to 100 for a free infidel to death by stoning for a Muslim. Similarly, the Goa Inquisition once prosecuted the capital crime of sodomy in Portuguese India but not lesbian acts. In urban India, where social media and corporate initiatives have created increasing awareness of LGBT rights, the scenario looks more upbeat for gay men than for transgender people or lesbian women. While urban LGBT voices that are heard through several online and real-world platforms form an important part of LGBT activism, these expose only a part of the diverse and challenges faced by the community. Far away from gay pride parades, meetups, and heated discussions on Twitter, families in rural India have their own ways of dealing with LGBT individuals. In some parts, secret honor killings are planned so that the only way for a young gay man to survive is to run away in cover of the night to some city with no money or social support. In other parts, lesbian women are subjected to family-sanctioned corrective rapes, which are often perpetrated by their own family members. Vaijayanti Vasanta Mowgli, a trans woman LGBT activist and public policy scholar at Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Hyderabad, who has openly spoken about her abuse at school, says that lesbian women and trans men in rural areas end up at the bottom of the hierarchy when it comes to basic human rights within the unit of family and village. She invokes B.R. Ambedkar when talking of rural socio-economic environment. Ambedkar thought of village as a unit of violence. That is most true for LGBT issues. She says, village medics and babas often prescribe rape to cure lesbians of homosexuality. Refusal to marry brings more physical abuse. Stories of family acceptance that you see on TV and other media are more of urban phenomena. Even in educated urban India, suicides by lesbian women make headlines every year. It comes as no surprise then that tribunal recently ruled that only danger to lesbians in India is from their own families. It is an encouraging sign that schools and colleges have begun to take up institutionally approved LGBT activism. Rohit Revi, one of the founders of Orenda, the Gender and Sexuality Club at IIT Gandhinagar, says without LGBT activism in educational institutions, LGBT issues largely remain untalkaboutable. Our broad agenda is to make LGBT students and their struggles visible. Invisibility is the first and biggest challenge that we need to take up. He says, though theoretically most educated citizens support alternative sexualities and gender identities, when it comes to day-to-day behavior, there is an urgent need to change the ground reality. Bridging the gap between academic knowledge and everyday experience means we need people to question stereotypes. Say, for example, the rampant telling of homophobic jokes. We need people to pause and ask what's so funny about such oppressive talk. We need our allies to point out that such behavior costs us our freedom and dignity. Creating a critical mass of such an aware group is an important part of on-campus activism, says Revi. Juneja finds today's youth open to listening and accepting alternative identities. She shares a recent experience where Gyasi conducted podcasts about bullying of LGBT people at school. We got an overwhelming response. When I see students open about such deeply personal issues, I know the change is taking root. However, Mowgli is a voice about going deeper into investigating how schools can play a more robust role in supporting LGBT issues. Currently, our educational model is based on obedience to authority, unquestioned following of rules and regulation. This must change. We have to encourage our children to question and learn from debate. Children must be taught about their basic human rights and the tools available to protect those rights, she says. Secondly, they must know about legal frameworks and options to challenge these frameworks. I am not talking of heavy legalese but simple legal concepts. She says. She added that asking young people to take individual responsibility without talking of systematic change is futile. You can't say you are responsible for your life, so you should work positively towards your own freedom of expression. We need to talk about Section 377. We need to talk about new transgender bill, which the vast majority of transgender people find unacceptable. Families and individuals cannot change much as long as the system supports oppression of LGBT rights. Gohil sums up the hope of LGBT community when he says that once educational institution becomes their allies throughout the country, future generations will have better chance of living up to the ideals of equality. What better way than to prepare the future leaders of our country to believe in the LGBT rights? Each time a school or a college decides to participate in LGBT activism, we come closer to bridging the gap between the reality and a truly inclusive society.